Kia ora koutou, make yourself comfortable because this might be a long one. I'm going to get on a bit of a roll with this, I think. This isn't me. I'll explain all in a moment. But first of all, I'm just going to point out, as it may be obvious, that I am pointing my camera at my computer screen in order to share this material with you. I'm just giving you glimpses of this video, so I'm not doing a copyright breach. And this is an exemplar for something, something bigger. I'm pointing the camera at the screen creates this jazzy effect, and if that makes you feel peculiar or triggers seizures or migraine or anything like that, then my suggestion is don't even look at the screen, just listen, because most of my videos are podcasts anyway. Just try and give you something to look at, usually not me because I'm not very easy on the eye. And you can get it all through listening, really. So the second thing I want to say as a preamble is I may have been a bit naughty with the title of this video to make a point. Okay, and what I may do as well, which I sometimes do, and it's very much a YouTubey thing, sometimes when I do a video, I'm kind of killing several birds with one stone. And kind of looking at one particular thing from several different angles, and the limited nature of the title that you can apply in YouTube. You know, you only have so many characters that you can use for the title, and then it tells you you've got to be more succinct. So sometimes, not very often, but sometimes I will put the same video out more than once with a different title, because I know it will the target audience for the video will be mixed, and it might be kind of quite radically different audiences and communities that would respond to a very different title. So I may do that with this one. So it's not an attempt to deceive anyone by tricking you into watching the same video twice, because I'm sure you're all kind of pretty soon cotton on that it's the same video, and I've just told you. So just to explain, that's why I've done that. Now another kind of caveat and explanation, so beginning with all the kind of the disclaimers and everything else, is it might look like I'm attacking this particular YouTube channel, which I'm not. It might look like I'm attacking Christians and Christianity, which I'm not. It might even look like I'm having a pop at the New Age or witches, which I'm not. So the only thing I'm having a pop at really in this video is gullibility. Gullibility caused by the absence of critical thinking and appropriate what's the word I'm trying to the ability or the willingness or the aptitude or the inclination to seek out accurate information on a topic, rather than to seek out, you know, actually very poor, opinionated, highly inaccurate and often distorted and prejudiced information. So this video is an appeal to critical thinking, to use a very Christian term. I've forgotten what it is now. It's gone out of my head. It begins with D, and it's like discrimination, but it's not discrimination. You know what I mean. It'll come to me in a minute. So, okay. So first of all, this channel. Okay, I have not got any beef with this channel. Touching the Afterlife. Okay, there. Successful channel, 185,000 subscribers. Now, I don't know if it's a Christian channel or if it's just a channel about people's near-death experiences and stuff like that. So I haven't looked at other videos on the channel. And this particular interview with this guy here exemplifies a wider point that I want to make. Okay, and this applies to YouTube and other media as well. Okay, so this is a guy called Tim, who is supposed to have been in a band back in the day. Now the thumbnail, why can't we ever show the thumbnail? Can I just find the thumbnail and show you that? because the thumbnail appears to show him, there we go, appears to show him back in the 80s or whenever it was, it says a hairband to hell. So I can see what they've done there with the thumbnail. Stay still. Why do they do that? These little thumbnails, when you look at them and the video starts to play, they always remind me of like the portraits on the walls in Harry Potter, you know, when they come to life. There we go, hairband to hell. So what I think they mean there is hair metal band, because this guy tells a story, and I think it is a story. So this is also going to be about deception detection to some degree as well, which is another interest of mine. So there's the interviewer. Presumably she's the host of the channel. I don't know if she's always the host of the channel. She's a good interviewer. In fact, a lot of YouTube interviewers never shut up and they don't actually let the guests speak. She says very little, which I think is great, and just occasionally asks the question when he's going on, when he gets a bit stuck. He gets a bit stuck on a certain aspect of his story, like a bit of a record that's kind of caught, and she just nudges him. So she's good. So I'm not having a go at her either. I don't know her name. Okay, so you've seen the thumbnail now. Let's flick onto the video. Like I said, I'm not going to plagiarize and show all the video, but I want to show you a little bit of it in the background because the body language is quite interesting at times, and we'll get into that. So I might pause it though because it distracts me. So where do I start here? Where do I start? Okay, so I've been wanting to make a video like this for a long time, because I'm a YouTube junkie. I consume vast amounts of YouTube on all kinds of topics, all kinds of things. I look at pagan content, I look at Christian content, I look at atheistic content, I look at everything. And I've noticed a certain pattern with videos from Christians that are really dodgy. Okay, so I'm not saying Christians are dodgy. I'm not saying all Christian channels are dodgy. There's some really good Christian channels, but there are some where they just discernment. That's the word I was looking for. There is no discernment between somebody that is giving an accurate testimony and is coming up with utter bollocks, to be blunt. Okay, and this guy here, I would stick my neck out and say he's talking utter bollocks. Okay, and recently I've been watching a channel by somebody called Kellyanne Maddox, who is a witch. I think she's an author as well. And she's got a YouTube channel, talks about witchcraft, and she's done a couple of videos recently on Christians having a crack, having a pop at witches, and coming out with very inaccurate statements about them, and about people that claim that they were witches and have converted to Christianity. Okay, and I've enjoyed those videos. I like her presentation style. I'll put a link to her channel in the comments, not in the comments, what's it called, the description box. So words and me aren't kind of getting on right now, are they? So the two things I want to look at together. So one is Christian stories, or Christian. It's what I'm going to talk about isn't limited to YouTube, but YouTube is my source, okay, for this. So everything I'm talking about is stuff that I've seen on YouTube. And there are two things. There are, common themes are among Christian videos is a near-death experience where somebody who's not living a Christian life, or is not a Christian or not a believer, they might be a pagan or an atheist or a Satanist or anything, and they have a near-death experience that literally frightens the bejesus out of them, and they convert to Christianity. They become born again and accept Jesus, and then kind of share their testimony. And then there are people who don't have a near-death experience, but who claim to have been from well, there's a range of things that they talk about, but witchcraft, paganism, Satanism, various other isms, and then they become Christians and disavow themselves. That's not the right word. They basically look back very disparagingly on the path that they were following beforehand, and often warn people against it and say, you know, don't do what I did. That path is it's a trap. It's, you know, it's lies. It's not real. It's the work of Satan, work of the devil. So I want to talk about both these things, okay, together, because I think they're very similar now. And really, what this is about is things like confirmation bias and lack of critical thinking, as I've said. So the confirmation bias of Christians often, not always, and confirmation bias can include other things, but often it's around the basis of a oh god, I'm losing this word now. Words are going. I'm very tired today. I didn't get much sleep last night. Redemption, that's the word I'm looking for. A redemption story. Okay, because Christianity is all about redemption, isn't it? That's the, you know, one of the central themes about redemption is basically mankind becomes estranged from God. You know, that's the kind of the Garden of Eden story. And God loves mankind, loves his children, wants to bring us back. You know, restore the communion, restore the connection between God and man, and you know that takes place in the Old Testament, through the Old Covenant, and then through Jesus Christ in the New Covenant. And for man to be reconciled, that's the word I'm looking for, mankind to be reconciled with God, according to you know modern Christian thought, is you create a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, who will restore you to that familial and, you know, reconnection with God, which was lost at the time of the fall of man. Okay, so and the Bible is full of, you know, stories of like the prodigal son. I think there's a statement. What's the statement in the Bible? Is that part of the prodigal son story, or is that somewhere else? It says there's something like there's more celebration in heaven through the redemption of one sinner than there is through something else. I can't remember what the comparison is. So somebody that's versed in scripture, perhaps you could put that in the comments and tell me what that verse is and whether it is a separate thing. But basically, I don't think many Christians would disagree with me that redemption and reconciliation is the central core of Christianity. So man and God have fallen out, to put that in very prosaic terms, and the whole purpose of the Christian movement and Christianity is to bring them back together. But it happens on an individual basis, not on a mass basis. Every individual, and the belief of Christianity is that God is wanting to reconcile with every individual, and is looking for an opportunity to reconcile with every individual, and will act in everyone's lives to try and to give them the opportunity of salvation and to be brought back into the fold. So some people would say that we all have a guardian angel. Some would say it's more like a personal Jesus, that's kind of looking to rescue us, looking to bring us back into the fold. Okay, so that's probably pretty obvious to most Christians, but thanks to your patience for that, because lots of people watching this won't be aware of that if they're not part of the Christian upbringing or such like. So this is a guy supposed to. So the picture, and I'd be really interested where the picture comes from. It's supposed to have been part of some kind of music scene, and the thumbnail implies that it's hair metal. But the actual video talks about underground music. That sounds, what's underground music? The Trogs. Only some of you will get that. Only so, if you get that reference, if you get that joke, underground music would be the Trogs, then just put in the comment Trogs, and I bet very few of you will get that. So if you do, hats off to you. So this guy, Tim, he claims that he was in that scene. He was, I think he says he was a musician. I think he says he was a songwriter, and he was into all sorts of bad stuff. And then he took an accidental drug overdose and went to hell, and had a bit of a look around. And then Jesus came along and showed him heaven, and now he's all redeemed. Okay, now I don't believe a word of it. Okay, this guy is as transparent as anything, as far as I'm concerned. You obviously you can disagree. It's my opinion. I can tell you why I have that opinion. Yeah, so that's the story basically. So it's a testimony that he's giving. Now, I'm not saying, okay, that this kind of experience never happens to anyone. I'm not saying that nobody has the experience of a near-death experience where they go to hell and see Jesus go to heaven. I'm not, you know, who am I to say that that's not, you know, that's not possible, that doesn't happen. Okay, well, all I'm saying is it doesn't happen. I'm pretty sure it doesn't happen. It hasn't happened to Tim. Okay, so first of all, he is incredibly vague. Now, I follow a lot of, I study deception detection. I study something called statement analysis, where you can process what somebody says and look for signs of deception. And I study body language, all these kinds of things. Now, there's a guy that's big in not just the body language world. He's big in all kinds of communication and very educated. He's studied in neuroscience and various things. A guy called Chase Hughes, and he's well known, among other things, for being part of the behavior panel, which is a panel of 4 top body language and behavior analysis experts who have a YouTube channel, and they look at videos of people who are in controversial situations and give their opinion about, you know, is this person lying, you know, is this person telling the truth, what's going on in the body language, what is the body language saying and the behavior saying, and maybe, you know, is it sympathetic to what the text, what the person's saying, or is it contradicting what the person's saying, and just kind of looking at what might be going on that different level. It's very science-based, and it's an art and a science, I would say. But Chase Hughes, one of his many pearls of wisdom is he talks about detail valleys and detail mountains. And a lot of the stuff they cover is things like police interrogations. So in a police interrogation, one of the indications of deception is, or one of the potential indications of deception, I would say, is where somebody is trying to cover something up, where they're asked or where they're talking about something that's not directly related to the crime. They will go into all sorts of detail. Okay, so you know, if somebody is shopping just before the crime takes place, they'll talk about the shops that they went in and what they bought or what they looked at, and they'll describe it, you know, in great detail. They'll bring it to life, maybe by, you know, using all the different senses. You know, maybe talk about how brightly lit the shops were, and how, you know, what the smell of chips or Woolworths or whatever it might be. And then when it comes to something where there's a bit more, where they're trying to conceal information because it might incriminate them, they suddenly become very scant upon the details. And this Tim is full of detail valleys and detail mountains. Where he goes into detail mountains is actually with the near-death experience stuff. And I believe he does that because it's all made up, and he can just make it up, and because it's creative, and nobody can argue really with that. You know, you can't tell. Well, I'm arguing, I guess, but nobody can really say, you know, you didn't have that experience, because it's a subjective thing, isn't it? We can argue that he didn't have a near death. But if he did have a near death, or even if he's just making it up, it's his experience, isn't it? So it can't be kind of, you can't argue it. You can't argue the details. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. So when he talks about heaven and hell, he goes into, it's very colourful, very descriptive. Often he closes his eyes. He's closing his eyes a lot during this, which is known as eye blocking, which can be another sign of deception. And he looks shifty as hell. I'll show you. We'll show you a little clip of him talking in a bit. But when he talks about his life, both before and after, he's really, really vague. And he says things like he was abusive in his marriage and with his kids. But it says nothing more, just that he was abusive. And he talks about his lifestyle. He talks about how he was a high flyer, and he talks about, I had houses and boats and planes, and talks about these things in just this really flippant kind of really quite rapid way, where he just says, oh yes, I had big houses and nice cars, and no detail there at all, but he goes into detail when he goes into what I would describe as his made up bit, his kind of, which is his story. Okay, and then there's a bit of a spoiler if you watch this, but he talks throughout the testimonial. He talks about what I really want, what I really want. This should be made into a film, because this is it should affect people so much. I think he just wants for a film to be made and to get the money. I really do. I think that's his game. Now, I would also say he doesn't talk like a Christian. I think he talks quite vaguely about God. He does quote scripture, but not a lot. And the scripture that he quotes is all from the Gospel of John, or the Gospel according to John, whatever you call it, St. John's Gospel. So which is probably the only bit of the Bible he's read. And it just doesn't hold water. And he looks, let me show a picture of him as well. Let's talk a bit more about his body language. We'll roll the film. I'm not going to show the sound. He's got his eyes closed for a lot of the time. Now, the thing about body language is you can't just look at a single gesture and make an assumption based on it. You're looking for clusters. But this wriggling around that he does, he's wriggling around like so what is it? Another one of the panelists on the behaviour panel, Greg Hartley, talks about a worm on a griddle. This guy's a worm on a griddle. So just look at that body language. Mainly eyes closed, wriggling around, hand touching the face. Now that can be reassurance. That doesn't mean he's lying. It's comforting. It's an adapter. Touching, putting pressure on the face can often be very reassuring. So people do it sometimes when they're under pressure, and they can be under pressure because they're lying, or they can be under pressure for a whole number of reasons, or it could be just a habit. That's their baseline. They do touch their face. But look at this guy. He's got his eyes, and he talks like that for such a long time, wriggling around, eyes closed. Would you buy a car off this guy? So I've got nothing against him. Why? He wants a film to be made, and to make lots of money. So there we go. I could say more, but then I looked in the comments, expecting people to say, "Oh, this guy's squirrely. This guy's sketchy." I wouldn't, but nobody. So people are sharing their own experiences. So it's mainly sort of Christian people. They're giving their own testimonials. It's not about being good. I saw a lot of good people in hell. So that was one of the things he said, was that there were good people in hell, but they weren't Christian. So a lot of people identifying with what he said, sharing their own stories, which same happened to me. Isn't Jesus just the greatest? Well, yeah, he may or may not be, but I don't think Jesus had much to do with this guy's story. Look at him. And he comes across as quite likable. But he never says, what band he was in. What's this bollocks about underground music? That'd be the Wombles, wouldn't it? underground music. I'm showing my age now. If you get the reference to that as well, put Wombles in the comments. So what I think happens is, I think what's the word? People, I want to say inscrutable, but that's not right. What's the word I'm looking for? Unscrupulous people see the Christian community as a feeding ground. And I think this is probably mainly kind of narcissists and chancers and grifters, because they know how much the Christian community likes a prodigal son, and they get a huge amount of attention when they come, when they do these testimonies and come into the Christian fold, and they get lots of approval from people. They get to go around, they write books. I think this guy's probably written a book. They get to go on tours, they go on tours from one church to another, and they get loved up by everybody, because more celebration in heaven from a redeemed sinner. And usually their stories of their sins are highly exaggerated as well. Now I'm going to talk a bit more broadly and move on a little bit from the near-death experience and talk a bit more about Satanists, witches, pagans, and New Agers who convert to Christianity. And this is where I refer you very much to Kellyanne Maddox, because she talks a lot about these people. She shows some footage of people and gives a commentary, like I've given a commentary on this one. So so there's a few specific points I want to make. So first of all, now I am a walker between the worlds, which sounds like a mystical statement, but it's not. I have had experience in lots of different communities. I suppose I'm a bit of a social butterfly, and I kind of move between different groups of people, different special interest groups, without ever becoming completely immersed in any one group. So I can still see things with an outsider's perspective, but with an insider's knowledge, if that makes sense. And a big proportion, I'm not saying all, certainly not all, that wouldn't be accurate, but a big proportion of people who say I was a witch, I was a Satanist, I was this, that and the other, before I turned to Christianity, they are clearly, the way they speak and the information that they give is inaccurate, is not the kind of things that somebody that would be in that community would say. Okay, now I can't speak for all the communities. I haven't been personally involved in the satanic community, but I have studied it in some depth, and it's not really what you think it is. And I've done another video on that, which is actually a book review for a book on modern Satanism, which actually, Satanism is quite surprising if you look into it. Now, Satanism is a broad church, if you'll excuse the pun or the misuse of the word church. There are lots of different kinds of Satanists and different flavors of Satanists, but when I hear the testimonials of some of these people that claim to be ex-Satanists, you never get somebody that had a mild experience in Satanism. Well, that's rare. If they're involved in Satanism, then it's always kind of like extreme stuff. It's like, oh, they sacrificed babies at the altar and we all had to drink their blood. And Satan appeared in front of me, and I had, and this is kind of part of the narcissistic thing, because often with the story that these people give, is if when they're a Satanist, they have a personal audience with Satan himself. They become pals. They have tea with the devil, and then when they convert to Christianity, often they have a very personal experience with Jesus. Now, a lot of Christians would say they have a personal experience with Jesus. And I'm not going to argue with that, but not to the extent that Jesus physically appears before them in the same way that a family member might appear before them, and they have tea together. So a lot of this belies a narcissism, that a grandiosity and a kind of, they really sex up the story. So when they're a Satanist, they're a big time Satanist, and they've met all the princes of hell, and they've seen all this supernatural stuff. And then when they have a conversion experience. It's always in glorious technicolor. Whereas my experience, you know, most spiritual experiences are much more inner. They're much more subjective. You know, you might see Jesus, but it will be in your mind, with your mind's eye. It's more likely that you'll feel the presence of Jesus or sense the presence of Jesus. It's unlikely to be a five sense vivid real world type experience. I'm not saying that never happens. I'm sure sometimes it does. But these people, you know, it always tends to, you know, they tend to have these absolutely extreme, vivid, full-on experiences. Now, my experience, most people that follow any religion or counter-religion, whichever way you want to call it, you know, not that many people have really full-on spiritual experiences. What happens is a lot of people experience things like synchronicity. They feel like they're being led to something, or they feel a presence, or they feel a peace, or they feel a voice in, you know, a voice in their head, which is their own voice really, but it's you know, the source could be coming from a higher place, you know, giving them guidance and stuff like that. Very seldom is it a 3D real world experience. And often for these people, they tell of these experiences both in their pre-Christian life and in their conversion experience and in their post-Christian life. Now this guy, that's what I forgot to say, he goes on to talk about how he does these, he's done healing with people, and he did this thing where he healed somebody, because it's not him, it's Jesus, but you know, he's kind of humble bragging really, and this guy's kind of broken spine twisted underneath his hand and regrew itself. So this is really common, and I think generally speaking, I think this is part of a, you know, a narcissistic profile. I'm a psychotherapist, so I look at things from a psychological perspective, and other perspectives, but you know, often this is narcissism, what we call grandiosity, and narcissists feed off attention. So there's no better way to get attention. If I wanted to get attention, I would go to an evangelical church and tell them that I used to sacrifice babies. Maybe I wouldn't tell that because I might get arrested, but I tell them, you know, I tell them some exaggerated tale of demonology and devil worship, and that now I've come to Christ, and everybody would love bomb me, and I get lots of attention, and then I'd write a book, and then, you know, and that's what I would do if I was a major narcissist. Now I think there's another profile of people that might report similar experiences, but it's very different, and these are people who, what they call fantasy prone individuals. And so on the 5-factor personality model, they would have a very, very high score for openness to experience. So some people live on the borderline of, they're not necessarily psychotic, but they're right on the borderline of being psychotic. And I've met a few people like this that have always reporting kind of weird experiences, you know, and you know, if anybody's seen a ghost, it's them. They've seen the ghost and that kind of thing. And my sense is they're not lying. My sense is, but they live on the fringes of reality, and their critical thinking is probably not good. Their emotional thinking is very high. Their imaginative faculty is just through the roof, you know. So I think sometimes when people make these kind of claims, they're that kind of person. Okay, so, and I'm not just excluding the possibility that people tell this, you know, people give a testimony like this and it's true, but not for Tim here, not for dear Tim. He's making it up completely. Look at his little face. So yeah, so that's the first point I want to make, is that the experiences that people claim to have had prior to conversion to Christianity are exaggerated and extreme, and so I suppose broadly what I'm trying to say is they're inaccurate, and then if you look at a Venn diagram, a subset of that would be people that is just grandiose, exaggerated and extreme, and then another subset of that on the Venn diagram would be just generally inaccurate. And this is the one thing that just makes me laugh, is so many people that give these testimonies of, you know, I was a witch, I was in the pagan world or satanic world or whatever, will use the word warlock. Now, almost nobody in the pagan, occult, witchy, or I think satanic world, as far as I'm aware, uses the word warlock. It's a word that's used a lot in fiction. It's a historical word. I believe it's a Saxon word, and actually it means oath breaker. So it's something that is often referred to as a word for a male witch, whereas generally in witchcraft, the word witch applies equally to males and to females. So in most witchcraft traditions, you know, you're just a witch, whether you're a male or a female, if you call yourself that. So the word warlock just doesn't really come into anything, but it apart from on these kind of testimonials where it's warlocks everywhere. So that's the other, and just the kind of description of things. So again, you know, a lot of people will say, a lot of these videos will be, I was a Wiccan. I was into Wicca and converted to Christianity. And again, their description of Wicca, they will, if they're Wiccans, they will. So first of all, should I give a quick introduction to what Wicca is here? Maybe, yeah, quickly. So Wicca is a religion. It is a religion. It was founded in the 50s by a guy called Gerald Gardner, who studied indigenous religions, Freemasonry, and claimed to be part of a hereditary coven of witches that operated in the New Forest. And he assimilated a lot of these different traditions, including things like Druidry and that kind of thing, into a system which he called Wicca. Wicca meaning an old word for wisdom, I believe. So the Wiccan religion is heavily focused on witchcraft, but it is a religion, and people work with gods and goddesses, and it's generally pantheistic, which means there's more than one god or goddess, and people will work with a wide range of different pantheons. So some people who are part of Wicca will work with Egyptian gods and goddesses. Some will work with native pagan gods and goddesses from their own culture, or they might work with like the Greek pagan deities, and they might mix and match. So it's a very popular religious spiritual path, probably one of the most well-known of the witchcraft paths, but there's lots of other different schools and approaches and groups of witches, you know, and there are a lot of people that just do their own thing as well. They just they read from different sources and different traditions, and try things out, trial and error, and do what feels right for them. And there are other groups of witches, so there's different schools of Wicca as well. And so you can get Dianic witchcraft as well, and you can get there's always a huge topic. Check out Kellyanne Maddox because she knows her onions when it comes to all that stuff. But if somebody's a Wiccan, then they'll again, you know, they'll describe these, you know, usually these extreme experiences. Now, most people I know who are Wiccans, they'll have lots of inner experiences. They'll have lots of things where, you know, I did a ritual and it helped me address a personal issue that I was working with, you know, or I felt the presence of Pan in this instance. But very rarely do they say, oh yeah, Pan appeared, you know, physically, and this happened and that happened. And then another thing that happens is people that are part of a witchcraft tradition. So Wicca has a lot of ethics to it. So do no harm is one of the kind of the tenets of Wicca. But a lot of people who claim to have been witches that turn to Christianity claim to have you know, been cursing people, been controlling people, you know, been manipulating people through witchcraft and stuff like that. Now, that can happen. Not everybody that's a witch is a Wiccan. You know, even Wiccans can be naughty. But for the most part, you know, the Wiccan tradition is about doing good, not harm. So what else? What was the other points that I want to make? So inaccurate terminology. You know, always having 3D experiences. I'm not saying this happens in every case, or that every single facet happens in every case, but a lot of these facets will happen in a lot of the cases. Now, the other thing that I find happens is people will say, I was a witch and now I've turned to Christ, blah blah blah, and they'll describe their witchcraft, but they're not really describing witchcraft. They're describing, you know, quite generic, common New Age practices. So they'll say, "Oh yeah, I was a witch. You know, I was into crystals. I used to do tarot. You know, I used to, you know, and witches often will use crystals and tarot, but that's not the defining character of witchcraft. So if you just do tarot and crystals, it probably doesn't really mean you were anything, you know. It means you've kind of practiced you know, you did a few new agey things, and a lot of people will describe that and then say that they were a witch. But doing a bit of tarot and having some crystals on your sideboard does not make you a witch. Okay, it's a bit more to it than that. You know, witchcraft is well, it's craft, really. That's hence the name. You know, it's so it involves knowledge. It involves a more elaborate, a more involved practice with more intention, I guess. I mean, I guess you could say there's a thin line between some New Age practices and witchcraft. But then the thing about the New Age is an amalgam of a whole bunch of different traditions. It's you know, the New Age has got a little bit of Buddhism in it, it's got a bit of paganism, it's got a bit of witchcraft. It's a lot of influences in the New Age come from the New Thought movement. A lot of influences in the New Age come from a lot from oh god, what were they called? Madame Helena Blavatsky. What was Theosophy? Also things like Rudolf Steiner. So that's what the New Age is, really. That's how I would define the New Age. Is it's a lot of these philosophies and practices used to be very discrete and distinct. You know, so there might be some overlap, but you know, but you would say, no, I'm following Theosophy, or I'm following spiritualism, but New Age is like it's all been a bit all these things have been diluted and mixed together. So if you do a few New Agey things, that doesn't make you a witch. Witchcraft is a much more distinct path, much more distinct practice. So that's the other part of the thing I would mention is some people weren't even practicing witchcraft. They were doing, you know, some you know, kind of fairly kind of mild New Age practices. Now I know a lot of Christians that kind of, you know, think that they're just as dangerous as witchcraft, and from a Christian perspective they would put it all into one bucket, you know. And this is the problem, I think, is when people convert to Christianity, that they do that. They trash everything that they did before, and they this is a point that Kellyanne Maddox makes as well. You know, somebody was talking about tantric practices, and they're talking about yoga and things like that, and saying, well, you know, I was a witch because I practiced yoga and I practiced tantra. No, you were a yoga practitioner because you practiced yoga, and you were a tantric practitioner because you practiced tantra. And this is one of the things about some of the Christian philosophy is, and this varies, there's a real spectrum, you know, between you know, fundamentalist Christians that think that, you know, everything that's not Christianity is essentially as bad as anything else. So tarot and Hinduism and Islam and Tai Chi, it's all the same difference. You know, it's all just the devil popping up in different guises. Now, I guess, yeah, theologically, I guess you could argue that, you know, that it's that all constitutes false religion. I don't like that view, you know, because I think it's kind of saying, well, my path is right and everybody else is wrong. Not only are they wrong, but they're evil. I don't like that view, and a lot of Christians don't have that view. And a lot of Christians, you know, the Pope, who's recently died, you know, actually, you know, acknowledged that, you know, Christianity isn't the only way to God, you know. Now a lot of fundamentalist Christians would be frothing at the mouth at that statement, you know, because Jesus is the only way to God, and obviously that's scriptural, so I can get why people would think that. But I think what you need to do, I think, is, as human beings, we don't we shouldn't just look from one perspective. We should cultivate the ability to look from different perspectives. So you might be a Christian and say, yeah, well, yeah, I think yoga and crystals are all ultimately the work of the devil. But you wouldn't just brand, Hinduism and say dowsing. You wouldn't just say that they're all the same thing, and that somebody that practices dowsing is a witch, or somebody who practices Hinduism is a witch. You just wouldn't do it. So witchcraft is a very distinct thing. You might think that all things that aren't Christianity just fall into one category, but they don't. They fall into a whole bunch of different categories. If you believe they're all evil and all influenced by the devil, that's your prerogative. But if you actually deal with that things and communicate with other people, then you're misleading them. You're not a vessel of truth. You're a vessel of confusion. And if you think they're the enemy, then you need to know your enemy. And I have heard a couple of Christian channels where people have got a really good understanding of different traditions, and surely if if all these things are your enemy, know your enemy. I don't think they are your enemy. One of the things that Kellyanne Maddox talked about was a lot of paranoid Christians that think that witches are actively trying to sabotage churches and things like that. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think there are people who are anti-Christian. They probably wouldn't call themselves witches. Some of them probably would. They probably would call themselves some kind of Satanist, or probably more so a Luciferianist. But even then, no, probably not. No, I'm oversimplifying. So there are people who are anti-Christian. So, for example, like in Scandinavia, a lot of the black metal bands there, there've been cases of people burning churches and things like that. So there are people that are actively hostile to Christianity. Generally it's because they've been harmed by Christianity, usually at some point in their lives, either psychologically or in terms of more tangible abuse. But certainly, like the majority of people that call themselves witches, they don't even believe in a Satan. They might not like Christianity, or they might be indifferent to it, but they are unlikely to go out of their way to try and bother Christians. So witches are not part of a conspiracy against Christianity. So some of these videos that Kellyanne Maddox was sharing, people were saying that witches will regularly frequent churches and infiltrate them in order to try and put spells on people within the church. And that's like, I won't say much more about that because she covers it far better. So use your noggin. Just because you have a strong faith is great, a strong belief, doesn't mean that you have to believe any shit that's put in front of you just because it's consistent with your belief. Okay, so for example, I might believe in Bigfoot. Okay, but if somebody comes knocking on my door saying that they saw a Bigfoot in my back garden, I'm not gonna buy into that. That's just nonsense. Okay, so there are people that will share testimonies which I'm sure are very credible, of genuine experiences that they have had, and there's a whole bunch of people who are either, like I say, they're fantasy prone. They've got a kind of very slim grip on reality. They've been or people who have very minimal critical thinking and have been influenced by other people and are therefore extremely gullible and have no filter for the information that comes their way, and don't actually bother to go to credible sources of information. And there are narcissists, which I think Tim falls into the category of. I mean, it's a guess, it's an opinion, I don't know, I've not met him. Or grifters, and maybe is he a narcissist or a grifter? Maybe he's both. He wants to film, and it's so fucking obvious, So why am I becoming impassioned about this? Well, the truth shall set you free. Truth is important, and discernment is important. And we can have faith and discernment. You know, just because we believe something doesn't mean we have to be completely gullible. We can apply critical thinking. We can be more discerning about where we go to for sources of information. And I think we should, because when we don't, then we're living in a culture of ignorance. And just think back to, you know, the Middle Ages. Okay, the Middle Ages, well, it wasn't the Middle Ages, actually, it was the early modern period. Everyone says it was the Middle Ages, but the witch burning period. And actually, I say witch burning, the UK, heretics were burned at the stake, but witches were hanged. But in Europe, a lot of witches were burned. I'm not sure about Scotland, actually. Scotland, they might have been burned. England, they were hanged. And we say witches, these were people that probably didn't do... Probably, you know, I don't think there really was that much of a witch culture around at the time. There might have been a few people that were versed in herbs, medicinal herbs, and maybe some traditional practices. There may have been a few people that were actually involved in witchcraft, probably the minority, and there were people that just got on the wrong side of somebody and got accused. And the process, as everybody knows, for examining whether somebody was a witch or not would mainly involve things like torture and leading questions. And, you know, they were kind of presented with scenarios like, you know, did you go out on the Sabbath and, you know, change yourself into the form of a hare and run to a meeting with a coven of witches whereby you consorted with the devil? And they just say yes because they've been tortured so much. And the amount of people that were tortured and killed horribly during that period, and that was all through ignorance. Now, I can kind of, I can have more forgiveness and tolerance for that ignorance in the context of when it was in history back in the day, you know, when, you know, science wasn't, you know, hadn't told us so many things. We didn't know as much about psychology. There was more corruption. You know, individuals had more power and were able to abuse that power more easily. Well, I don't know, maybe it's as bad today. It's certainly getting that way. But in this age where, you know, we've got some brilliant scholars. We've got some brilliant research work has been done. We've got, you know, we have access to information about critical thinking, how to be more discerning, how to establish truth, even things like statement analysis and things like that that help us detect deception. People like what's his name, Cialdini, I can't remember his first name, who wrote books on all the different things that influence us and how sales, you know, and marketing and things like that are used. Psychology is used against us. You know, that information it's not hidden, it's available. You know, we can free ourselves. We do not have to be at the mercy of people's propaganda or people's ignorance or people's just laziness sometimes, or people's hidden agendas. Okay, you know, and the manipulation that goes along with these things. So I hope my message has come across clearly that I am not saying that people don't have near-death experiences. I'm not saying that people don't have redemptive experiences with Jesus. I'm not saying that you know, there aren't people who are witches and Satanists who convert to Christianity. I'm sure there are, and I'm sure a lot of the testimonials that people come out are sincere. But there are so many that are so obviously spurious, you know. And if you're a Christian, these people are mocking you. You know, these people aren't supporting Christianity. This guy here, he's not a bloody Christian. You know, he sees Christians as a soft touch. He sees Christians as a pathway to getting a film and making lots of money. Okay, so, you know, please, just because you have faith doesn't mean you know you have to throw your brain out of the window. Okay. So tell me what you think. Be polite. I don't mind if you disagree. I don't mind if you heartily disagree and think everything I'm saying is nonsense and I am a mouthpiece for the devil. I don't think I am. I'm a mouthpiece for truth. It'd be a good discussion to have. And please share this video. And please, you know, when you, I mean, this applies as well to, it's not just, you know, I'm looking at Christianity in this instance because it's come up as a big thing, but I also watch a lot of you know, these spooky videos, so-called paranormal videos that people send in, and then you get like Sir Spooks and Slapped Ham and things like that, and I enjoy watching them. They're fun, but the main fun I get from them is thinking, well, I don't know, I can see how that was faked, and trying to kind of work out how they did it, you know. But there are so many people there that they just believe it because they believe in ghosts. They believe that if somebody puts up a video where, you know, a chair appears to wobble on its own, it's a ghost. But why? You know, you can believe in ghosts and also believe in fakery. You can believe in God, and you can believe in Christ and also believe in fakery. And I think we need to. So I will stop now before we reach the hour mark. I hope you found that interesting and not too much of an ear bending. Let me know what you think, and we will catch you in the next one. Rangimarie.